It's 12:02 on Tuesday, February the 6th. The House Criminal Justice Subcommittee is now in session. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Representative Davis. Here. Fritz. Here. Gillespie. Here. Hardaway. Here. Howell. Here. Halsey. Here. Johnson. Here. Lamberth. Doggett. Moody. Russell. Here. Towns. Chairman Doggett.
Present.
Chairman Doggett, you have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, do we have any personal orders before we begin today? I am going to take personal orders myself here. I've got a constituent with me, Lawrence County Circuit Court Clerk, known world famously as Abigail's dad, but Mr. Tommy Lee Kidd. Thank you for being with us today. And we'll go to our Sergeant of Arms. Well, before we do that, we'll go back to Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if you hadn't seen the news, very sadly, an artist I think all of us respected a lot, Toby Keith, passed away. And if we could have just a short moment of silence, certainly someone who, if, you could agree, disagree with him or whatever on political stuff, but the music he sang would sure make your feet tap. So just a moment of silence for Toby Keith. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Tyler Muniz, Sergeant of Arms, for our weekly words of wisdom. Oh,
good day, everyone. With 1,098 career wins, 8 NCAA championships, during 38 seasons with the Lady Vols, the words of wisdom are brought to you by Pat Summitt. Amen. Change equals self-improvement. Push yourself to places you haven't been before. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Representative Hardaway, did you have something you wanted to?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I've been holding this a couple of days, but we had a shooting in Orange Mound in Memphis. It's one of those instances where you just wonder what kind of heathens are running around in our society. It was a car that was carrying 2 women and 3 children. 2-year-old, I believe 7 and 8. 2 of the children were injured. The 2 women, one was injured and one was actually killed. And I would ask that, because it's just gotten to the point, Mr. Chairman, to where it's hard to call ourselves civilized again. Even in the jungle, you don't have just random, reckless violence the way that our society seems to have devolved into. So I would ask, Mr. Chairman, that we just take a moment of silence for those who were in the car, the family members who are impacted. Those children will never be the same. The classmates or relatives will never be the same. That we just take a moment of silence and do a silent prayer for their well-being, but also for society as a whole. Amen.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we're going to jump right into the calendar. If you'll go with me to item number 3. Item number 3, House Bill 1909 by Representative Bulso, be rolled 1 week. Brings us back to item number 1, House Bill 1602 by Representative Chisholm. You are recognized. No amendments?
No amendments.
You recognize, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman of the committee. I have brought to you House Bill 1602. And what this bill does, it requires that law enforcement has an audio or visual recording whenever doing a formal interview of an juvenile. I want to thank law enforcement and the members of this committee for working with us on this legislation. So with that, I stand by for you.
Any questions for our sponsor? I do have one question. It is audio or visual, so they do have a choice in that matter. It does not have to be one or the other. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Questions called? Any objections? Seeing none, we're voting on sending House Bill 1602 on the full criminal. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes prevail. You move forward.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Item number 2, House Bill 279 by Representative McKenzie. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 279 talks about Tennessee's the only state in the country right now that requires those convicted of felonies be up to date on their child support before they can gain the right to vote. This bill sets up, if they're in a payment plan and making adequate progress toward their obligation, they can have that right restored. What the ruling by Attorney General Subcommittee and the implication by Commissioner Goings does, it takes those more heinous crimes that people are really concerned about, this will not apply to them. Only those non-violent felonies where they can get their gun rights restored and things of that nature. This allows those people in those categories making payments toward the child support to get their right to vote restored. I always say that child support is a huge responsibility. Father of 3, but voting is a right. So as long as they are have served their term in prison, come out and they're able, they're working, they're doing a good job, they can be part of that American system again.
All right, members, we have any questions here? First on my list is Chairman Hulsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think in your bill, it says that if they don't adhere to the payment plan, then they lose it. I don't know if you've got some constitutional issues there. The reason I say that is if somebody's indigent and they can't pay, you're going to put a judge in a kind of a constitutional bind of taking away that right after you've restored it over the indigent issue. Do you got an answer for that?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. That's a great question. And those things will factor into that person's ability to pay and what that payment scale looks like. That arrearage can be spread out over a 10-year, 20-year period. So that's where that's addressed. And, and as our citizens are coming out, becoming our neighbors again, which most folks who are currently incarcerated will become our neighbors again, what that will do is to set them up at the time that they're not making money and to set up a payment plan. Now, as they get jobs, they're the custodial parent can petition the court to bring them up. So that's why I think it's going to go the other way. They'll start out low, and as they get ably employed, they'll be able to give more toward that arrearage.
Any other questions, Chairman? All right, Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to thank you for bringing this bill. I know that I think the current statute is constitutionally suspect because there are folks who are not paying their child support who haven't been incarcerated who don't get penalized for this. And these are people who have done their time for their crime and are being penalized just because previously they were incarcerated. This has been overturned by other states as not being constitutional. So I think that as we lead into people who, just because they've been incarcerated, if they've done their time, should not be held to a different standard of citizens out there who aren't making those payments but are still allowed to vote. So I think we need to ultimately write that completely, but this is in that direction, so I appreciate it.
Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir, for bringing the bill. I'm in support of restoration of rights. I believe that that's a constitutional right thing to do, all our rights. And so I would just ask, and this goes back to Chairman Halsey's question, would it be something you would entertain to modify to take out that potential for putting that judge in a bad place? I heard your answer and I appreciate it, but is that something you'd be willing to modify so that we could alleviate that concern?
So at this point, I'll ask a procedural question. Yes is the answer to your question. I know I'm on my last particular role. So is that something I can do and still get incorporated during this session? Because I agree, if that language is not clear, I don't think it would take a whole lot to clarify that. So just again, from a procedural standpoint, what does that look like?
So currently, the situation we're in, that you're in your final role, if you were to make an amendment to do that, would you also need an amendment for the effective date?
The date, yeah.
Yes, sir. So that's something that we were going to discuss at some point during this process, but this bill would still be alive. It would go to the final calendar of the committee in order to make those necessary changes that you want to do, if you choose to do that. Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'm not sure whether those who have concerns are willing to move this along to full. And the sponsor would hold the bill until those specific individuals are satisfied with whatever language they think is adequate. But I would ask them to consider that. Thank you, Chairman.
Representative Towns, you have something?
Mr. Chairman, that suggestion that Representative Hardaway made obviously is a good one. And or if what is the procedure with committee roles now? If we could, do we think we can get this done by next meeting, which means next week? If we have to have a role, what are we doing now with committee roles? If the chairman or the committee requests a role, how does that work? Counting against what he does.
Currently, right now, he Representative rolled it to this calendar from last year, which he's exceeded his three rolls for the 113th. And so the final place for this bill to go today would be to the final calendar. Yes, sir.
Thank you. You know, again, this I'm at the committee's will, but I will assure this committee that if it's not fixed to the members' liking in full committee, I'll pull it. But I will commit to fixing what the two members issue between now and full committee.
Leader Lamberth.
Mr. Chairman, and obviously, as a sponsor of the bill, I know you're trying to determine kind of which direction to go. I was more just on the bill itself. One of the other representatives mentioned previously incarcerated individuals. These are convicted felons. Yes, they were incarcerated, but they're not incarcerated on misdemeanors. They had been convicted of felonies, and many times very serious felonies. And just for me, I mean, being a father is one of the most important roles I've ever had in this world. And it is incumbent upon us as fathers to provide for our children, to do everything we can for mothers as well. But when we're talking about child support here, I mean, a lot of this, we're talking about dads. And quite frankly, I think it's not too much to ask for you to get your rights restored, for you to have satisfied your responsibility to your own children. My hope would be is that these folks that are convicted felons that were incarcerated at one point, is that they would reenter society just as you were saying. And one of the first things they should do is, again, pay fines, fees, restitution, and yes, child support, because their children many times have suffered because of the choices that they made that led to their incarceration, and then their kids suffered. And it's just for me, however we form this, I can't vote yes on something that I know there's a mom out there, there's a dad out there, there's a single parent out there that struggled for years probably to take care of children. And now we're making it all that much harder and to collect back some of the money that they spent to take care of those kids. That should be the first thing they consider. And I want them to get their voting rights back. I want them to reenter society fully, but take care of your responsibilities first. We shouldn't have to beg or browbeat or cajole or order folks to pay child support. It's your children. Please take care of them. And I know that goes further afield than what your bill does, but it's philosophically just where my issue with this is. I think folks need to take care of their child support responsibilities, and I want them to get their rights restored. But we already have a process for that. So it's just my 2 cents on it.
Thank you. What I'll say, the restorative process is an iterative process. It's not a one-step thing. It's not a cliff that you fall back into good graces. You have to build that. And that's what this will do. This will build that trust, build that process back. Now, to be clear, a person who's incarcerated, the child support payments continue. Those arrearages continue. So an expectation that a person who's been a non-income earner or a $2 an hour income earner with TriCore can totally repay those bills on day 1 or day 300 is not an accurate description of reality and what happens in our penal system. So what I would say, let's start to build that process back together. You got to put those families back. And the way you do it is to make both people feel whole. And what makes both people feel whole is that person that's been taking care of that child, now help is on the way. It's not a lottery. They're not going to get a boatload of cash on day 1, but they're going to be able to help out with that electric bill, help pay a little daycare while they're on the way. And the person, the offender who's been out there released, so he or she has done a good job of going through that process, they are now free. They have paid their debt to society, and they're left with a mountain of stuff that they left prior to being incarcerated. And now they have to dig out that. But it's one shovel at a time. In your model, it would be an automatic thing. I would love to flip a switch and we take care of our finances. That's not the way we pay for our cars and our houses. It's an iterative process. So I would just encourage you all to consider this iterative process. That's what this is. People are happy. If you got that check for $50 more or $150 more, that's helping. It's helping the entire family, and it's building that glue back together. So again, I would just encourage you all to consider this bill with those amendments that my 2 good colleagues from East Tennessee has suggested to me, that I commit to you that I will incorporate.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you. And we've served together for several years now, and I don't think it'll surprise you. I agree with virtually everything you just said. I just think while they're in the process of digging back out, that is part of the process. And so once they have completed, I guess, that restorative process, and part of that restorative process, again, is fines, fees, restitution, and yes, child support, because while they were in prison, someone else was having to foot the entire responsibility for raising their children. And that is a responsibility that they still owe back. So again, I agree with virtually everything you just said. I think we're just talking about a matter of timing of when they would be fully restored. I personally think it should be when they have completed all responsibilities from their actions, because this child support it's not just about child support. We're not talking about somebody who was out and they lost their job or they fell behind on child support payments. I mean, this is someone who committed a felony, went to prison for that, and another parent or loved one or guardian had to fulfill that responsibility. I just don't think it's too much to ask to go ahead and complete that process where you've totally dug back out of that hole that this person has created on themselves. I think we're talking about timing, but I think we both want them in the same spot. I think we both want them fully restored as a full citizen of the state to be able to vote and do everything else. It's just a matter of timing. Thank you for bringing the bill, though. It is definitely a conversation we should all be having.
Representative Towns.
Thank you. As it relates to this bill, and thank you for the bill as well, does this bill take in consideration that when an incarcerated person has been incarcerated X number of years with a felony, that they are just not well received in the marketplace to be able to get started back with a job that can consider first order business for you to be able to take care of yourself, where you can pay your rent and you don't have to worry about food, this, and other, and then whatever others you have to maintain yourself. And obviously you got to pay your debt to society. That means your children, whatever. But does it take into consideration of that we're just not welcoming as we should? I wish we had some kind of placement program for people that have been incarcerated, like job placement program that could help them. Somebody can speak for you once you run afoul of the law and did things you ought not have done. But we could have someone to speak for you to say, yes, it's a good lady, it's a good man, and they'll be there, they'll go to work and and be there on time and do your good 8 hours work for a day, 40 for a week or what have you. Is any of that considered in this bill at all?
To your point, it's extremely difficult to find employers that are open to taking convicted felons. This bill doesn't specifically speak to that, but the whole process is once you're released back into society, you get your employment, then that child support judge or referee will take your financial considerations. You have to have a job, what those finances are, and then set your child support payment for that and monitor to ensure that you're doing a good job. Now, if you lose that job, I mean, and this may satisfy the colleagues, either party can go back. Okay, if I'm working at the bus company, which that's one of the employers in Knox County that takes our citizen, if for some reason I'm injured and my salary is taken down to 60%, I can petition the court back. So it's a two-way process that may get to that indigent issue that my colleagues were speaking of. But this bill doesn't specifically address that. I would love to create better employment opportunities. I think our rate of recidivism would go down tremendously because, man, you all know, casting that vote, it means something. Standing in that line, it means something, not just for elected officials. It's a powerful thing to do. Yeah, I'll take a digression, but I was at a restaurant in my neighborhood, and one guy begged me for a sign. He's just going to keep the sign because he's the first person that he had been able to vote for, and that's a good feeling. So I just want to, it's going to continue to build the family. I guarantee you all, it feels good. We're not in that predicament, but we know people. We have family members that are in that predicament today. And so what that's going to do is help that person reconnect with his or her family.
Representative Towns.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. No, and I need help here from the legal minds here that participate in the court system. Let's say guy steals an iPhone. Okay. Now, an iPhone, is that an iPhone? I'd love to try to clip it from you later.
No, I had to check.
The iPhone may cost $2,500, $3,000. I don't know. Is that a felony? Okay. Now, see, the concern is that a TV iPhone, mind you, everybody knows stealing is wrong, period. No excuse for it. However, that can wreck your life for a long time, a very long time. And it's like, and I'm talking to the leaders here on this dais, it's like the dog chasing his tail. If we don't do additional things, the dog will never catch his tail. He can't do it. Okay. So if we don't figure out how to couple with this legislation, other things to give an opportunity to a person, a man or a woman, young teenagers to work, you got to work. Now, I was always taught this as a youngster, that an idle mind is a devil's workshop. In other words, if you don't have anything to do as a kid, adults, this, another, you get in trouble, okay? Work fulfills so many different things in our lives, okay? We all have to have it. Men have to go to work, women have to go to work, and as a child, I worked. We just worked, okay? So I would like to see, in addition to some of this type of stuff, that we do some other things to make it palatable to the public to hire people after they've done their stint. You got to hire folk. You got to give these people an opportunity to work. And we need to say more about that. Even with the scarlet letter, the big scarlet F, once you've done your deal, done your tour duty down there, you got to go to work. We want you to work. Everything we're talking about is generating, it's dealing with resources, dealing with finances, dealing with money. And if you can't get it the legal means, you won't be able to do what you need to do. So I'm suggesting that we look at other ways in addition to this to try to change the mindset of the powers to be to hire our citizens that run afoul of the law. Because it could be, when you see felony, you just see felony. You don't know what it's for. Could be for an iPhone, could be for a television, could be for a tire. Okay, it's the cost of it. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure that I clearly understand that you're saying that they have done everything else on that checklist for restoration of rights. And then the only thing that is barring them from is the child support payments. Is that accurate? Because I wasn't really sure. And then also because it doesn't really talk about the time frame of when that voting period or them being able to vote starts. And so that's what I want to kind of get clear. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for that question. Yes, this only deals with the child support aspects of their court costs. Court fees, all of those things have to be satisfied. Strictly talking about the child support piece. And it will kick in once that agreement is made in a court of law. So once that referee says, bam, $200 a month is what you're going to pay. There's a process that they go through that says I have this agreement, and now they can get the right to vote.
I guess my concern too is an established pattern of behavior. I want to ensure that even though they've come before a judge and said, I'm going on to this payment plan, anytime that you have patterns of behavior, they're a good indicator of future behavior. So if you have someone showing that they are working hard to make those payments, that to me, there should be some sort of reward or agreement in place to say, we will review or look at the restorations of your rights. For me, just by going into that plan, I don't agree with that automatically allowing that person to have their voting rights restored because they haven't shown that pattern of behavior of being able to complete that requirement.
Thank you. So just to be clear, and I appreciate you asking that question. It kind of turned on the light for me. So if you look at item 3 in section 1, if a person willfully fails to adhere to the terms of the payment plan entered into per subdivision, the court that provisionally restored, and that word provisionally was added, restored the person's right of suffrage, may revoke the person's provisional right of suffrage. Prior to revoking the person's right of suffrage, the court shall provide that person counsel to see if he or she, now I'm going to go to the end, court appointed counsel, and offer the person opportunity to be heard and submit proof of the person's financial inability to pay, which may include a signed affidavit of being indigent. So I think that addresses that issue. So again, and that word provision, again, I appreciate you asking that. That's what, in talking with the legal, it's not a full restoration. And I think it will address our leaders' concern. It's not a full restoration. It's a provisional. You got that hook that says you must continue to make these payments or you're snatched back. So I don't think it'll be a constitutional issue because this is a provisional right being granted. Thank you.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. So I guess my concern with that too is then the courts are going to have to coordinate with the Commissioner of Elections back and forth. And what sort of burden are we creating to ensure that our voter rolls are clean?
Okay. Okay. As it relates to that, I would say it's worth it first, but there is a process. There's a paperwork process, but in this digital age, once that person fails to make that child support, there's an equation, there's an algorithm, payable on the 5th, late on the 15th, on the 16th, they get automatically kicked an email to the Register of Elections that says John Doe can no longer work. This is an easy fix. This can be done in our rural counties, our urban counties across this great state.
Representative Hardaway, you was on the list. You want me to come back to you?
I do want you to eventually come back, but I think I'm going to go ahead and get this on the record. You know, the expectations of parenthood, fatherhood in particular, sometimes involves more than merely the financial contributions. And that's with the understanding that responsible parenting, fathering or mothering, involves adequate financial support for children. But at times, that's not possible. And you have to seek not to be excused from it, but to find other ways. It may be that when you have a child support order, there are conditions there, and you could violate it by being late, simply by being late, or you could violate it by underpaying for a month, and then you're back into trying to catch up in the rearage. You got to get back in court, and all the legal entanglements that go with it. So I think what you're proposing is excellent. I think setting a role model for children to be able to see, one, that redemption is real, and there's no such thing as being patriotic without being involved in your representation. That's the most critical part. And it's not just a matter of being patriotic, but if we're looking at why we fought, one of the incentives for fighting the Revolutionary War in the first place was taxation without representation. And yet we expect individuals to come out of a condition where they had little or no opportunities to contribute to financial child support. And we're not going to be understanding and allow them to get into a position where they can make that happen for their children, not just the financial support, but the emotional support and the role modeling of civic engagement. I think all of that is important when we talk about child support. I think that individuals where life is literally passed you by, you can be incarcerated for a year. And with the advent of AI and quantum computers and the technology rush that you find yourself getting dizzy from every day, you could be so far behind that you spend the rest of your life trying to catch up. The trade or the skills that you had when you went in, you may very well not have those skills to the level to where they're even relevant in today's society. So I appreciate your bill. I think that it's got so much that's positive about it. We understand that responsible parenting involves the psychological, the emotional, the mental aspects of shoring up children. And you can't do that if you're just a partial or temporary citizen. That just doesn't jive. I think from the language that you read, and Mr. Chairman, maybe we can go out a session a little later to ascertain whether it does what address the concerns that some of our members have on what happens if you don't stay on track and fulfilling your full financial responsibilities to support your child. That language sounds like it addresses that. So at some point, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that we go out of session and get the interpretation, legal interpretation of how that applies to those type of situations from Attorney Fogarty.
You want to go ahead and do that now?
Yes, sir.
All right, we're going to go out of session, hear from legal services.
Michelle Fogarty, Office of Legal Services. Under the bill as written, it states that the court that provisionally granted the person's right of suffrage may revoke that provisional right of suffrage, but under the bill, they would be required to provide the person with a court-appointed counsel to determine if they're indigent. There is an Attorney General's opinion from General Slattery that suggested including the language regarding indigency because there seems to be a split in court decisions as to whether or not if the person is in fact indigent, whether or not the right of suffrage can be provisionally withdrawn.
So in essence, the way if we did not have that bill, this legislation move forward, then there are circumstances currently where full rights are restored, and there's no guarantee that that individual is going to be consistent with child support or any other financial obligations in life. Is that correct?
Well, under current law, the person has to be current on all child support obligations in order to apply for restoration of their voting rights. And that has been upheld by a Sixth Circuit opinion.
And there's nothing that says that that person's citizenship or right to vote would be revoked if they fell behind on child support in current law. Is that correct?
Correct. You cannot revoke someone's right to vote for failure to pay child support. The court you can revoke the right to vote for conviction of a felony offense.
So in essence, we're adding, and you may not want to respond to this. I don't know whether it's a question or whether it's a comment, but in essence, we're actually adding in conditions that don't exist, which would address situations that some of my colleagues have expressed concern about, that would give us leeway, or give the courts leeway to address some of those failures for a certain class of people, but still to address some of the failures of keeping a consistent child support and tying it to actual restoration of rights or revocation of rights. So, and no need for a response from counsel on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, counsel.
Thank you. Any other questions for legal while we're out of session? I do have one question since we're here. Currently, in order to get these rights restored, you have to be current on all fines, fees, restitution, and court costs. Is that along with child support? Is that correct?
Yes, there are two separate considerations. You have to be current on all of your court-ordered fines, restitutions, and court costs, and you also have to be current on all of your child support obligations.
And this bill only affects child support, so someone could not be current on restorations, fines, fees, and court costs, but be on a payment plan for child support and get those rights restored under this?
No, no.
Okay.
This just takes away the aspect that requires them to be current on child support obligations.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for legal? Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Chairman. Counselor, does the current law allow for payment plans for the restitution or court costs?
No, sir.
All right, thank you.
All right, we're going to go back into session. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm still trying to grapple with the fact that plenty of folks out not paying child support who are able to work and refusing to pay, they're not being penalized, but someone who is a felon and who has served their time is being penalized. And I think that's a serious problem when you are making that distinction after somebody has done their time. I expect people in this body to bring a bill where folks who haven't paid child support, they're not being good dads, so they shouldn't be voters. Are we to expect that type of legislation? I just, they've served their time. It's causing a difference and between people, two groups of people who are not paying child support. And I think it's an issue and we need to fix it.
Representative Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the sponsor. I appreciate what you're wanting to do here, but if I might, I've got a friend who's a friend of most of us who used to serve in this body. He used to chair in a very important committee, and when the bill seemed to be in trouble, he would tell the sponsor, "I feel the cold wind blowing." But rather than the cold wind blow your bill out of this committee, let me make a suggestion. Did I understand you earlier that you were willing to add an amendment to this bill to clarify some of the sections?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's the policy of this committee. It is in transportation. We don't pass a bill out of sub until it's in the proper position for the full committee. There is another option that you don't have to worry about a roll. You could take it off notice, do your amendment, and then put it back on notice at your leisure, and then bring it back to the committee, and you would not lose a roll. So that's an option. I just wanted to throw that out there.
To my first and most favorite chairman, I appreciate that comment. I wasn't on this committee. I mean, the committee I sat on. Let me clarify. No. First committee that I sat on as a freshman. I wasn't on any of y'all's committees. That's why I surveyed the room before I made the statement. Oh, no, I was on. Oh, my two favorite people. I have a size 13, Mr. Chairman. But no, I appreciate what you're informing me of. So at this point, I'd like to take this bill off notice.
All right, thank you. Without objection, House Bill 279 off notice. Item number 4, House Joint Resolution 798. Representative McCalman.
Second.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. I was going to hope to go for 75 minutes on this one, so.
You've got 45, so make it count.
Members, HJR 798 is strictly an urge to the governor to work with the surrounding states, governors, and their AGs to create a network to track data on human trafficking. That's the bill. That's the resolution in a nutshell, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the sponsor, Representative Johnson?
Isn't this what the DOJ and our federal law enforcement does?
Representative, I can't speak to what the federal government is doing. This is strictly having a compact between us and neighboring states, ma'am.
Representative Towns.
Thank you for the bill. Let me ask you a question. Would this in any way include having a computer system where everybody's putting in and they're accurately and timely tracking information via the system, and they can talk back and forth to each other, that the system may be integrated?
Representative Towns, I would certainly hope so. I can't speak to the design of that. I would leave that in the capable hands of the governor's office. But I would certainly think that we would be having real live tracking data. Yes, sir.
Well, obviously, this is a serious problem throughout our country, and if we do it, we want to make sure that we're effective in doing it. This is very, very serious stuff, dastardly stuff, the kinds of things that happen to young people, boys and girls that are being trafficked. So we need to make sure that we have the resources to do it right and penalize these guys for what they're doing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Representative Towns, absolutely, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm a father of 3 young kids. It terrifies me to think that this could happen to my children. It's not just children from other countries that this is happening to. And yeah, it is an atrocity, and the people who are committing these crimes, in my opinion, are monsters, and this should be stopped in any way we can do it to help stop it. We should be. So thank you.
Any other questions for our sponsor? Questions called in, objection, seeing none, we're voting to send House Joint Resolution 798 on the full criminal. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Ayes prevail. You move forward.
Thank you, Chairman of the Committee.
Thank you. Item number 5, House Bill 1924 by Representative Butler.
Motion, second.
You are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. If you're not aware, I have a prison in my district, the greatest prison we have in the state of Tennessee, Morgan County Correctional Facility. And one of the issues that they brought to me was inmates continually exposing themselves to correctional officers, especially our female correctional officers. And while they have some internal processes to address this issue, it's become a prevalent problem across our state. And so what this bill does is helps to address that, to hold these inmates accountable. If you recall, I believe it was last year, the year before, we had a terrible incident over in West Tennessee where an inmate was released and killed a young woman and had some of these issues in his record. And so what this legislation will do will add 2 weeks to their sentence. If they're convicted through due process, they still have to go through due process in the court system. And once they're convicted, their sentence in that prison would be extended 2 weeks. If they have multiple offenses, then they would be served consecutively. And so I'll give you a specific incident in Morgan County. I met with the district attorney over there back in the fall, and they provided me a list of all of the inmates in Morgan County Correctional in the last 3 months that had been internally convicted of indecent exposure. And there was nearly a page-long list of inmates. And there was a handful that stuck out. We had one inmate that had exposed themselves 7 times and admitted to it or had been found guilty internally. And there were a couple that had 1 or 2. And so this legislation is to address the egregious cases where we have somebody that's done this 7 times in less than 3 months. Because we've got to respect our correctional officers. They should not be subjected to this. And so with that, I'll renew my motion and be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing the bill. Could you speak to exactly why the sentence would be 14 days, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great question. I picked 14 days with the hopes that, one, we won't extend their sentence very long, but we will send a message that we are not going to tolerate this kind of behavior. We're going to respect our correctional officers and our staff, because this doesn't just apply to correctional officers, it's medical staff, counselors, et cetera. And so that's the reason for not making it very long, is so that we're not continuing to drag this sentence out, but we want to hold people accountable at the same time.
And just one follow-up, I appreciate you bringing it. As probably the only one here that's been a correctional officer at some point in time and having lots of relationships with those folks that work at the penitentiary you're responsible for and others in the state. Those employees will appreciate this, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Representative Fritz, there are 2 on this committee that have served in corrections. It's okay. Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank thank you to the sponsor for the discussion, not for the bill, but for the discussion. I want to be clear about that. I'm already trying to research to see how much of our prison population is in because of what is in essence administrative issues. And this might be a quasi-administrative extension of the sentence. And I have a problem with that. I don't know what it's like to live the prison life. I've seen the documentaries, I've seen the movies, I've talked to individuals, but I can sympathize, but I can't empathize. But I would think in that environment, there's a whole lot of things that you want to do and that you might choose not to do in lieu of doing something else. And I'm not advocating any of the adverse behavior on the part of inmates, but I would be hard pressed to tell you that I expect any prison to have a full component of law and order within the prison. We can't get it with all of the prison personnel, much less with the inmates. So I've got a problem with this in that anyone that's in prison, obviously there's a situation where deterrents haven't worked anyway. I don't know that you're going to have, once you put someone in that environment, that this is going to serve as a deterrent. And I believe that any time you talk about prison, it ought to serve as a deterrent as opposed to any kind of revenge factor, et cetera. I don't know that the fiscal on this is going to reflect what the advantages would be for an individual who is involved in indecent exposure. I'll use that term. You might have it otherwise in your bill. I just don't know that the costs for additional incarceration wouldn't be better spent towards some type of mental, psychological, emotional counseling for that inmate and finding other ways for that inmate to express him or herself, finding what the issues are well ahead of time before reentry that need to be addressed. I can see some advantages in engaging that inmate with the counselors or the psychologists or the psychiatrists, but I don't see the deterrence factor. And I don't know that it wouldn't encourage some inmates to just keep doing it when it looks like they're not really going to fear another 2 weeks of being incarcerated. And some of them, it might be a case of where they just can't help doing what they're doing. If they had that self-discipline and self-control, they probably wouldn't be inmates in the first place. Okay? So I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to be able to support it in the form it's in now, but that's not to say you couldn't convince me of a different approach to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for those comments. I will give an example. The inmate that was on the list that I was given had committed this 7 times. And he was actually in for carjacking, not a sexual related crime. So whether he is acting out and he may be, you may be very well hitting the nail on the head. However, we have some of these folks, these mental health providers and some of those types of counselors in the prisons already. And so Morgan County Correctional employs about 750 people. And I don't think it's fair to our state employees to not hold these people accountable. Whether it's effective or not, we really don't know until we implement it. But we have to do something to hold these individuals accountable and not just be a free-for-all. If nothing else, out of respect for our state employees, because we appreciate what they do. And it's not always an easy task, but should they not get the same protection that we do out in the civilian world?
And I would suggest that there we may be putting that double whammy on it. And would have to go to legal to find this out. But we already, in my opinion, have too many instances that allow for an extension of sentencing, serving the original sentence, to extend it by administrative shenanigans, I'll call it. And we have to pay the same per day for that prison bed, no matter who it is that said that the inmate had to stay there. So I don't know whether your bill includes some type of referral or evaluation in advance of this finding an automatic extension of sentencing. Can you speak to that? When I say evaluation, I'm talking about psychological evaluation and actually securing the help that the inmate may need.
It doesn't address the mental health counseling or psychological evaluation. Those resources are available inside the prison. But I think we've got to be proactive here in protecting our correctional officers, because I don't think it's fair, especially to a female correctional officer, to be subjected to that over and over and over and nothing be done about it. And this is not administrative. They still have to go through due process through a court of law for this sentence to be extended 2 weeks. This is not up to the department. This would be up to a judge and or a jury to decide if this inmate's sentence is going to be extended or not.
Well, and I understand exactly what you're saying. I would suggest that it's quasi-administrative in that those charges wouldn't be brought without proper reporting and referral. But I'm going to, for the sake of time, relinquish the mic. But I still think that we would be more effective if we were to get the counseling, to get the psychological evaluation, and then the counseling necessary to change the behavior of that individual. Because if they're going to keep that behavior up and they're eligible at some point for release, they're going to take it to the real world. And we will not have accomplished anything except by, and this is just my assessment of the impact of your bill, where we just ask them to hide it until they get out of the system. Right? So if your bill had some component for psychological evaluation and psychological treatment, I might feel more kindly towards it. I wouldn't support it, but I would still feel more kindly towards it. All right, thank you.
Mr. Sponsor, a question for you. This is already current law, but you're in the prison system, you're saying it's a D felony with 14 days, an E felony with a maximum sentence of 14 days.
That is correct.
That's correct. Okay. Because current law already states a minimum sentence of 14 days. Because current law in 2019, it was changed. It states it includes guards and staff and so forth in the indecent exposure statute. Chairman Halsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to my colleague and friend out of Memphis. In my career, whenever I arrested somebody for indecent exposure and I said, "What are you doing, pal?" I never did have anybody say to me, "I'm just expressing myself." I just want you to know that. I did have a thought. I don't know if it changed the physical note because he brought that up. It's a good point. Under current law, it's Class A misdemeanor. Since you have a minimum of 2 weeks, I don't know if it changed the physical note. If you kept the same law as a Class A misdemeanor with a minimum of 14 days, if it would make a difference there. I don't know. You might ask about that between now, if this comes out of this committee and goes to the next one.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is quick. Comes from a constituent. In some facilities, apparently they consider, like say in a male facility, an inmate being shirtless as, you're not talking about that, are you? Thank you. I just wanted to.
No, that does
They
not.
wanted me to clarify. Thank you.
Leader Lambert.
Move previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we're now voting to send House Bill 1924 on the full criminal. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. The ayes prevail. If you wish to be recorded as no, please see the clerk. You move forward. Thank you. Item number 6. House Bill 2053 by Representative Capley.
Motion.
You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like your tie today. This piece of legislation was brought by the Tennessee County Officials Association and the Tennessee Court Clerks Association. That's a nice tie. I like it. This bill seeks to clean up part of the code relative to the time frame for court clerks that are required to notify the TBI of the final disposition in criminal proceedings. During the special session, we passed legislation that changed the time frame requirement to turn over these proceedings to the TBI from 30 days to 72 hours. All we're doing in this bill would be to remove the language from 72 hours and replace that to 3 business days. That's it. And I stand for question.
All right. Leader Lamberth has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on the previous comments, there were an obvious attempt to sway the chairman one way or the other. I was going to roll this to the heel of the calendar, but I have a question. So we just changed this not long ago to 72 hours. Why the 3 days? Where does the bill come from, and why would we change it back?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So basically, the bill came from the Tennessee Court Clerks Association. If the TBI proceedings were given on a Thursday and they're not turned in by Sunday, then the clerks would have a problem, and then we get into that kind of section of code where there's an issue. So this basically turns it into 3 full business days where they're actually in the office once they receive the reports.
Chairman Olsey.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And the only reason I say that is a lot of times the courts will hold on to them for a little while, and you'll get a stack of dispositions, and they get sent down to last minute, and the clerk has a real task of going through all those dispositions, getting them filed in the computer at the same time. So I understand the request.
You wish to be recognized?
No, sir.
Okay. That's what I thought. Any other questions?
He does a good job.
Question has been called. Any objection? We have objection.
No, sir. I just had a question about the time.
We'll get back to it, sir. All right. We're voting to send House Bill 2053 to full criminal. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, ayes prevail. You move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Committee.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Item number 7, House Bill 1981 by Representative Jones. You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With the will of the committee, I was wondering if I can roll that bill 2 weeks, because the bill I have that's right after, I have 2 witnesses for that I was hoping to we submitted to testify. And so if I can roll House Bill 1981 of 2 weeks.
Okay. That objection will roll House Bill 1981 2 weeks. Item number 8, House Bill 2030 by Representative Jones. You are recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. This is a bill that is a very short bill, as you can see, but it's about a very complex issue that is evolving in our state and in our nation, in the world, and that is artificial intelligence. And this bill is simply trying to amend Tennessee code that deals with revenge pornography to include images created using AI. And this bill came actually from an incident that some of my students shared with me, female students, that people were using AI to make inappropriate videos of them. And it most recently was in a lot of national media because the same thing is happening to some celebrities like Taylor Swift. And so in today's 21st century media economy, AI-generated images have become a widespread and unregulated form of original digital-born content creation. Unlike Photoshop or other forms of early digital alteration, AI-generated materials are done so absent the need for user-sourced images or without technical expertise. Children as early as elementary school have already been shown to use AI-assistive technologies, with some in middle school already demonstrating proficiency in everyday use. AI technology is capable of creating images and content derived from already circulated media, and images mined from the web manipulate and transform these great materials and render images completely new. This is an alarming evolution of technological capabilities that currently exists as a kind of Wild West outside the law. Currently, there exists little legal statutes or regulatory framework that consistently protect against AI misuse, and in the case of explicit images, protect victims. The issue of AI-generated images currently exists in a legal gray area, with dozens of attorney generals representing South Carolina, North Carolina, Oregon, and Mississippi already having joined together to call for wider action to address the legal gap and bipartisan desire to protect victims, especially women and children. The bipartisan group was also joined by prosecutors from all 50 states who signed a letter saying that they are in a race against time, citing a lack of legal framework and pressing need. South Carolina Republican Attorney General Alan Wilson led the charge with partner attorney generals from North Carolina and Oregon. Already, the U.S. Justice Department's Child Exploitation and Obscenity section has reported thousands of manipulated and digitally created images of children, increasing the circulation and distribution of child pornography with little legal apparatus to prosecute those who created and distributed the explicit materials. Furthermore, the FBI has currently flagged numerous instances of artificial images that include explicit images of children. And in New Jersey, a 14-year-old girl was relentlessly harassed by her peers after a classmate created and distributed an image of her where she was displayed nude, and her parents were informed that there was little room for recourse under the current legal code. This issue has become especially pressing after images of pop star Taylor Swift went viral on Twitter, in which she displayed fully nude and forced into non-consensual sex acts with numerous men. These images are abhorrent and should not be acceptable, yet under current criminal law, there is little recourse. Instead, victims must file tort claims for civil damages, suing for emotional damages and loss of reputation. This bill would help create a legal statute that would pave the way for accountability and give local authorities the ability to prevent the creation and distribution of such harmful images. This bill is in line with the state goal of ending revenge pornography, a law it passed in 2016. Furthermore, Tennessee, along with 40 other states, joined in a bipartisan effort to regulate and legislate the online circulation of explicit materials which are distributed for the purpose of malicious intent and harm victims and their families. This proposed law is about ensuring that images circulated by individuals, especially children, are held to account. AI images have created yet another hurdle for victims in the legal arena of revenge pornography, as victims must defend both their right to privacy against deepfake images whose purpose is to come across as a real, despite the use of AI-generated material, and how those images were understood and consumed by viewers as real. Regardless of whether the images includes the, quote, real body of a victim, the use of name and image likeness to imply an outright state such a claim means that the victims feel just as violated and vulnerable. Finally, this bill is in line with efforts from other states, with Utah and Ohio both having bipartisan efforts to update their state's criminal code 21st century evolutions in technology and ensure that existing codes can have the full scope of enforcement needed to engage with an AI world. If we care about protecting victims, we must update the Tennessee criminal code to reflect a 21st century reality. And with that, Mr. Chair, we also submitted two witnesses. I know we're having another technological issue with the software of making sure that they were submitted, but I hope that those witnesses were okay to come and testify.
Yes, sir. They, everything's good to go there. We do have an amendment on this, amendment code 13377. And we had a motion and a second on the amendment. So that is by Leader Lamberth. You're recognized.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing the bill. You may or may not know this, but back in 2016, the original revenge porn bill that was sponsored by Representative Mike Turner, a Democrat out of Davidson County, like yourself. Proudly co-sponsored that bill, and we were able to make that the law of the land. And that came from several circumstances that both he was aware of and I was aware of that had happened in our districts. It obviously, there are several bills this year that are coming through dealing with AI. The only change on this that I'm making in this particular amendment is that it would be a D felony so that this has some teeth. I mean, a lot of these folks are not going to be in the state of Tennessee. A lot of these people that create these images without the permission of the victims are going to be in other states. If it's a misdemeanor, it is extremely unlikely that they will ever be brought back to Tennessee for justice. And so that's what the amendment does. It just makes it a D felony. Quite frankly, if we went much higher than a D felony, which is where I think the punishment should be, it is liable to make it too costly to try to get funded. So a D felony seemed to be at about the kind of right range where it's serious enough that they would extradite somebody back, but it's not so serious that it would create an insurmountable fiscal note. So that's the reason for the amendment. And members, I would ask for your support of it. I hope anyways, it made it down to your office. We had sent a copy down to your office to make sure you had gotten this before today. I didn't mean to do this as a surprise, but that's all it does to your bill. It just makes it a D felony.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I didn't receive it, so maybe it was on my end, but thank you for those comments, and thank you for the bipartisan willingness to take this issue seriously. I think the only reason we put misdemeanors is it true that under current revenge pornography, is it a misdemeanor or is it considered a class e-felony as this is, because we're trying to just add this to the existing statute about revenge pornography. So we'd have to change that statute as well. As the only clarification I was going to get.
I kind of looked down at legal. I believe it is a misdemeanor for what's on the books right now. But again, most of those folks are inside the state of Tennessee. It's folks that are either here or maybe even across a border. But the D felony for this, at least in dealing with some of the other AI issues that we've dealt with, I mean, this can be almost from anywhere. I mean, all the time. So that was the reason for the D felony. I actually, quite frankly, would support a move to make revenge pornography in general a D felony. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. The folks that have, and you have some witnesses here today, I'm not sure what they're going to testify to, but if you've spoken with folks, I've spoken with folks, and I've told this story before, and I'll keep it brief in committee today because I want to hear from the folks that came. But when I was an assistant district attorney years ago, I had a young lady who came to my office with her husband, and they had married very young in life. There was no one else on the planet that has ever seen her naked as an adult besides her husband. And she apparently had shared some pictures of herself with her husband on his phone. A coworker had picked his phone up, saw these pictures, picked the husband's phone up, saw the pictures, sent them to himself, and then put them online where they were found by one of her friends who alerted her. She came to my office as a prosecutor at that time, and there was literally nothing I could do. There was nothing. No crime had occurred, and yet a horrible violation had occurred. So that's kind of what I guess that story and many of the others interest me in this. So yeah, I mean, if you or anybody else brings a bill, wish I had a bill that did that to increase revenge porn in general to a felony, I would certainly support it.
And the two witnesses we have are actually data and technology information experts who kind of can answer and talk about the technology. I think that this is something so new. I think this is one of the first discussion we're having about AI. So I just would like to invite these two very well-versed witnesses if they can come up and testify.
We're on the amendment. Any other questions on the amendment for the sponsor of the amendment? Yes, sir. Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Chairman, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak on the Jones-Lambert bill. The impact that AI is going to have on our life is incredible, and I think it's even more important now to speak to what the leader and I have talked about on numerous occasions. That's the deterrent effect. If a felony can deter that type of online sexual harassment, then it saves the victim from a lifetime of pain and aggravation and psychological torture, because it never goes away. So I support the amendment that the leader has offered because it's this more than anything else that we've talked about today demands a deterrent factor.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my concern, the question is, if we change that to a felony, does that change in any way, shape, the way the first part of the bill is written in accordance with the revenge bill that it's based off of? Could we ask legal if that poses a problem anywhere with the bill as it moves through committees?
All right, we'll go out of session and hear from legal services.
Michelle Fogarty, Office of Legal Services. The amendment raises the penalty for the entire offense of indecent exposure, whether it's committed with artificial intelligence or photographs or recorded video.
Any other questions for legal? Leader Lambert?
I may have accomplished more with my amendment than I intended. So, so when I had requested this amendment, honestly, the intention was just to affect the AI portion, but you're saying we have looped in kind of inadvertently what we discussed. So I guess we're just better at this than we thought. So this has raised the penalty for revenge pornography in general to a D felony. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Well, great. See how fast that happened. Thank you.
Any other questions for legal? Seeing none, we'll go back into session. Questions called on the amendment? Any objections? Seeing none, we're voting to add amendment code 13377 on the House Bill 2030. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Ayes prevail. You adopt. We're on House Bill 2030 as amended. We do have two that are here for testimony, and so we will go out of session to hear from Holly, Rachel, and Lena Winfrey. If you would, ladies, come up here, this front table there, Representative Towns will point you in the right direction here. What we'll do is I'll have you both, one at a time, introduce yourself for the record. You'll have 3 minutes each separately for your comments. We are kind of a stickler for time today, so we'll be keeping the time up here. So if we hear it buzz, I may wave at you or just tell you you're out of time, but members will be able to ask you questions after that. And if they ask you to continue on, then please do. So whoever would like to go first, introduce yourself for the record, who you're with, and you'll have 3 minutes for comments.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Holly Rachel. I am the co-owner of Rachel and Winfrey Consulting, which is a data analytics consulting firm. I'm also the president and co-organizer of Blacks in Technology Nashville.
Good afternoon. My name is Lena Winfrey. I am actually I do the same thing she does. Rachel and Winfrey Data Analytics Consulting. I'm co-owner of that, and BIT VP. I'm also Data Technology Fellow at Fisk University, and I teach data science for social justice. I teach AI courses and things of that nature. Okay. So I simply want to start off by giving a simple explanation or scenario of what AI is, because a lot of people are confused about what that is specifically. So AI, which stands for artificial intelligence, is like having a very smart computer or robot. Imagine if you had a helper that can think and learn just like you do, but it's a computer instead of a person. This special computer can do all sorts of tasks like recognizing your voice when you talk to it, having you find things on the internet, or even organizing your tasks with you. It's like having a super smart assistant inside of a computer. The way it works is by teaching the computer to do things step by step and then letting it learn from those steps. Over time, it gets better and better at the things it learns. Just like you get better at riding a bike, you get better at playing games with practice. So this is a simple analogy of what AI is. And I say that because we're now introducing deep fake technologies. This is where data is collected and learning. And AI systems include deep fake technology begin with data collection. A lot of people don't know that the data that you put in comes out. With that, it involves gathering substantial amounts of video, audio footage for a targeted individual such as a celebrity or a public figure. So the more that you're in Twitter, the more that you're making statements on a public scale, that's when you can be targeted. So it goes on by training deep learning modules, okay? And this is something that literally is an algorithm. An algorithm is a series of code or some type of mathematical problem that is targeting an individual. So they're looking through all the internet for everything that you or whoever it is will do. With that being said, generating AI has made that more exponential, okay? So generating AI is ChatGPT. Everybody's familiar with that. So basically what's happening is because of the boom of technology and the computers, now they're able to pick up a lot of data, big data. And with the big data, they can literally find every crumb of anything that you put representing yourself online. That means if somebody targets you, they can look at anything that's posted publicly and they can literally reenact that. So it gets to the point where deepfake videos might superimpose a celebrity face onto someone else's body, and that will synchronize their voices because they have the ability to replicate in such a high fashion. So misuse and ethical concerns for deep technology has raised significant ethical concerns due to potential misuse. Malicious actors can create convincing fake videos or audio recordings for purposes such as spreading disinformation, personating individuals, or fabricating evidence. These concerns have prompted calls for AI regulation to address the ethical implications of deep fakes.
Okay, so when we're talking about the AI regulations and legislation, although it's sort of a new phenomenon where we're seeing a larger proliferation of deepfake technology than ever before, quite a few different acts and bills have been introduced to try to regulate the misuse of AI. Most of these measures will aim to either prohibit harmful use of AI technology, require informed consent, so making sure that you have to have explicit consent for the use of an individual's likeness or voice to create AI generated content, requiring transparency and accountability, so making sure that companies that produce AI technology or software have to be accountable for whether or not that software contains bias or how that software is used. And then finally, penalties for violations, which are regulations that establish penalties for individuals or entities found guilty of creating or disseminating malicious deepfake content, such as what we're discussing here. So regulatory bodies and law enforcement agencies are responsible for monitoring and enforcing those regulations, and they investigate reported instances of deepfake misuse and take legal action when necessary. And then finally, while we're talking about regulation, it is very important to be able to balance innovation and security. So while regulations are crucial for addressing deepfake concerns and misuse, there's also a need to strike a balance between innovation in AI and security. And so regulation should not stifle legitimate and beneficial AI applications.
So in summary, AI, including deepfake technology, is powered by data and deep learning models. The ethical concerns surrounding deepfakes has led to the introduction of AI regulation and legislation. These measures are aimed to prevent misuse, ensure informed consent, promote transparency, and establish penalties for violations, all while balancing innovation and security in the AI landscape. Thank you.
Thank you both for your testimony, for being here. This is something that has really come about in the last couple of years, and I have a great interest in this because of some of the things that I have seen with my own eyes that you would video, especially, that you would think was real. And then when someone shows you the fake, how it was faked, from the original footage, it is extremely believable. It's scary. It really is. So thank you for being here with us. I've got Chairman Halsey on my list for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for being here. Yeah, he's exactly right. Scared me to death. I mean, you can ruin somebody's life over this stuff. I just had a question because I don't understand the technology of it all. How do you determine, I mean, is there a forensic way to determine what you're looking at is fake or it's real or it's been compacted together or with different pieces of data? And maybe we forget AI is smarter than we are. Maybe there should be some avenue for civil redress with the companies that produce the technology. I don't know. But thank you for being here, and if you can answer that.
Yes, it is very difficult to really uncover what's real and what isn't now that it's no longer just Photoshop. Most people think, oh, it's Photoshop. Now they're able to replicate based on human beings. That's what AI is. So it cannot happen. It can't happen by itself. I just want to point that out. A lot of people feel like, oh, artificial intelligence can move on its own. It cannot. It has to have a human hand behind it that is training it to do exactly what it's supposed to. This is why this particular situation is very hard to kind of deal with, because you would need somebody who knows how to code or forensic type analyst to be able to actually uncover whether it's actually true or not. So with that, this can be really detrimental to a lot of people who get affected by that. Did I answer your question? Yes. Okay.
So there are people who can systematically test this piece of evidence and say, yeah, is it thorough enough to see who did it?
Yes, when you are a data analyst, you can actually go back and see tags and data points. So you'll be able to see it if you actually know data. And believe it or not, more of us are learning it every day. So a lot of people will be able to have access to that type of technology.
Okay, thank you.
All right, members of the committee, I've got a couple more on my list. We have 4 minutes left in this room, so we'll try to if we can make our comments quick and we can go back into session. But Representative Johnson.
Yes, I'll be quick. I just wanted to point, I appreciate, because I heard you say, I talked with an expert in this a month or two ago, and I said, it does have its valuable uses. So I appreciated you saying that, yes, it can be used for good. But I asked him specifically, is it possible to put protections in place so that we use it for good and there are consequences for the bad. So it sounds from what you guys are saying, that's completely possible.
I would say yes, it's possible. Definitely if we have individuals such as rallying around regulation of it. I do feel like just like cryptocurrency is hard to control, this is another level of that. So with AI functioning and people who are actually highly trained in hacking, it's very difficult to kind of rein it in. But I feel like the backing of courts, et cetera, it will help tremendously.
Representative Towns.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Going to be quick and brief. Ladies, thank you all for the presentation. What I'm going to say is this, is that we're in for a wild ride, guys, because this stuff is only going to get smarter and smarter and smarter, and people are going to become more deviant and deviant and deviant. So we got to have experts at the forensic level that knows how to go in and find out this stuff, because you can frame people, people end up going to the electric chair with this kind of technology. It's dangerous stuff, okay? It's just can rain pure hell down on somebody's life. Question for you, either one. Just say you did not have a picture of a particular person and you want to do a pornographic tape. You didn't have their nothing of them. Can you do it from zero? Can you make it up from zero and make it as real as some of the stuff we see today?
So like Lena was mentioning, AI really thrives off of data. You have to have data in order to create the content. So in the Taylor Swift situation, her face was superimposed on another woman's body, okay, which made it look like she was doing things that she had not done.
Right.
Now, Taylor Swift, of course, has plenty of data out there with her image, her mannerisms,
Everything.
her, right? However, if there is not as much data, it's still possible, right? But it won't be as seamless. The more data you have, the more seamless the video or the audio can be. Whereas sometimes if you look at something, you can tell that's obviously fake, right? Because there's not as much data that was fed to that program. So it can still happen. It happens with normal people, regular people all the time. However, sometimes you can tell a little bit more if it's fake or not.
Okay. Question that I'm trying to get to is, can it generate a body itself? Just say you didn't want to put it on somebody else's body. Can AI at this point generate a body itself?
Oh,
okay. Yes. AI can do pretty much anything that's available as long as you give it the data to do it. So if there's a lot of data of a lot of different bodies, it'll compile that and clone it, which will then create the actual body that looks seamless. So typically with Photoshop, you could tell, you can have the outline or something's wrong or it's an error here. You can tell. But using data to this degree and how big data is now, you can actually replicate almost anything.
All right, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you, ladies.
Yes, thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go back in session. Thank you both for being with us today and the information you've shared with us. We're back in session. We're on House Bill 2030 as amended. The question's been called.
Second.
There is no objection. We're now voting to send House Bill 2030 as amended on the full criminal. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes prevail. You move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, all remaining bills that were not taken up today will be rolled to next week's calendar, and we are adjourned.